It's time for our next speaker. She is the author of a 10-year running column and also the book Workplace Sanity. With that, she's also the CEO of Narejo HR and brings in the hands-on experience of HR consulting spread over almost 2 decades now. With her background in psychology and neuroscience, she will be sharing with us some exciting principles for transforming our performance inside out. Please welcome the very dynamic and spirited Ms. Rahila Narejo.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Okay, so the theme for this conference is transformation. And today we're going to go on a little journey of transformation. And I always like to start with a story. Once upon a time, there was a young girl. And one fine day, that young girl's father told her that it was time for her to get married, and that it was already decided who she was to be married to. And before that girl could utter a syllable of protest, she knew in her heart that this was to be her kismet. And so she prepared to go on a journey of over 13,000 kilometers. And she left her obscure town called Los Angeles. Not many people know of it. And she traveled those 13,000 miles to a place known as Karachi. And this girl, when she landed in the city of Karachi, she recognized a very odd thing. And what was that? She looked at people around her, from her husband, her new family, her in-laws, and even when she ventured out, if she had the chance to, into the marketplace, the people around her, they were very different. Not that they were different in terms that they didn't have 2 eyes, 2 hands, 2 feet, a mouth. They were very humanoid in appearance, but guess what they were very different in? Can you guess? This. Their thinking. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Transforming thinking. Now, how many of you are leaders? Can I see a raise of hand? Leaders, I mean. Do you have people reporting to you? Yes? How many of you don't have people reporting to you? Anyone here? Okay, all right. Any of you are married? Those of you who don't have people reporting to you, are you married? No? Okay. Do you have children? Then you are leaders. You are all leaders. We are all leaders. So what is the job? If you're a leader, what's your job? What are you paid to do? What's your job? Inspire. Okay. Is that what your appraisal gets evaluated on? How many people have you inspired today? Maybe it should. But when I ask this question of leaders, what is your job? And if you look at any leader's job description, what does it say? Task management. Giving work, getting work. Giving work, getting work. Giving work, getting work. How many of you are busy doing that regularly? Giving assignments, giving goals, clarifying objectives, establishing the to-dos, and making sure that it is all done. Correct? Well, guess what? If that is your only job, you are already being phased out. Because there is technology in action today that we can have on our phones, have on our desktops, that manage tasks. Very easily manage tasks, and they manage it at a less cost than your salary. And to top it off, they're pretty easy to get along with as well. They don't have attitudes. So if your job, your only job is task management, it's time to wake up and realize that your job is going to become outdated and easily replaced. Unless you understand that your core job is to influence. And influence who? Influence people. You need to have the ability to get people to do things, to deliver results, to perform at a certain level. Even you need to have the ability to influence people to behave in a certain manner. Results and behavior. That is your job, to get it out of your people. So what is the tool that you use? What do you have that helps you to get those results and get the desired behavior? Now, in the olden days, we used to have very effective tools called the whip and the stick. But unfortunately, nowadays, we can't use those tools, right? So we got to look for alternatives, look for other means of influencing people, getting them to do what we need them to do. So what can we do? What do we do? Let's do a little experiment. Now, I'm calling it an experiment, although I already know what the outcome is going to be. But just for the sake of it, I'm calling it an experiment. And in this experiment, we're going to look at the secret to influencing results and behavior. Would you like to know that? What is that secret? So in this experiment, what I'd like you to do is turn to your neighbor, right? Just whoever is sitting closest to you, and just say hello. Just say hi. Go ahead. Just say hi. Yeah. Done? Okay. Now, what I want you to do is to put a thought in your mind. The person you just said hello to, you're remembering that this is your long-lost college buddy. And Itefakse, they are sitting right here next to you in this IPF conference after so many years, and now say hello again. I know it's a little gap age difference there, but you could still think. You could still think. Now, this was the experiment. Did you observe a difference between your first hello and the second hello? Was there a difference? What changed? Did the person change? No. Did the Marriott hotel all of a sudden change? No. Did you all of a sudden get a text from your HR department informing you that your salary had been increased? No. What then changed? Everybody. Thinking changed. even if it wasn't real, but just changing your thinking, you started a cascade of change automatically. So what did we just do? Or what did I just do? I showed you an example of what a leader needs to be doing starting today, which is facilitating positive change by improving people's thinking. Because if you can change thinking, behavioral scientists love to use this iceberg model, and I think the iceberg model practically explains everything in the world, and it also explains behavioral observations. If you notice, the first hello, what were you thinking? What were you thinking about your neighbor? The first hello. Nothing much. Not much. And because you weren't thinking much, how were you feeling about your neighbor? Nothing in particular. And when I asked you to say hello to your neighbor, how did you say hello? Pretty lackluster. And if you kept saying hello to people around you in that manner, what results would you have in terms of your relationships with people around you? Not very good. But the second hello, we went to the core. We went deep down below the water to the unconscious level. And we started to put a program into your brain, a very simple program. And when that program changed, while I was just saying it even, you probably noticed you started to feel different. And then when you said hello to your neighbor, you noticed a difference in your voice tone. You noticed a change in your facial expression. Even I observed a physical change in terms of reaching out and giving your neighbor a hug. I didn't tell you to smile. I didn't tell you to bring warmth in your voice. I didn't tell you to hug your neighbor. Then why did you do that? Because you changed the most important thing, which is your thinking. So now you're wondering, okay, Rahila, we get it. So how do we change people's thinking? What are we supposed to do? I get it. I need to start focusing below the water. And instead of pounding, task management, result, having policies and procedures to monitor behavior and values to define what behavior is acceptable, what behavior is not acceptable, instead of having all of these tools and controls. We don't need all of that. We just need to go to one level, which is the thinking. So how do we do that, Rahila? How do we change people's thinking? Do you have some type of magic formula that's going to give us this power? Well, I do. If you understand now that what is leadership? Leadership is simply transforming thinking. So how do we do that? I'm going to give you some secret insights to the source of all thinking. What is the source of all thinking? All right? All you might have heard कि लंबों की अक्ल घुटने में होती है, but I'm sorry, it's not there. It's here. The source of all thinking is the brain. And so I'm going to share with you some interesting 6 insights. And if you get these 6 insights, if you understand them, you will understand what you need to do to change people's thinking. Are you curious? Do you want to know what those are? Number 1, the brain is a connection machine. When you were born, all your brain cells, called neurons, were not connected. They were, in fact, what we now know, free-floating. No connections. And after you were born, I'm sure you must have, what's the first thing that came out of your mouth? A cry. And based on that cry, what response did you get? Did you get coddling? Did you get fed? Or did you get a big slap to shut you up? Hopefully it wasn't the last one. Because whatever response you got to that first cry, those free-floating neurons, cha-ting, made their first connection. Every learning that your brain does is the establishment of connections between neurons. And the fastest rate of connection making is from birth to the age of 5. Fastest rate of connection making, where you're learning at an accelerated pace. And the brain doesn't stop making connections. It continues throughout your life. Every time you learn something new, you have a new experience, it makes a new connection. So the brain is a connection machine. Connections between neurons. Now keep this point in mind. We're going to add on these insights. The next insight, up close, no two brains are alike. The connections you have in your brain are unique. No one alive today, I don't know how, 7 billion people? Or is it 8 billion now? Billions of people. And no one who has ever been alive on this planet, ever, has the connections that you have in your brain. So everyone has very unique connections, like everyone has very unique fingerprints. And so what does that mean? It means the way I am going to process this presentation is obviously going to be very different from the way you process this presentation. Why? Because that information, although it's the same information, it's being processed through different connections. And how do we establish those connections? Through our experiences. Since birth, we are collecting experiences and we're growing connections. Insight number 2. Insight number 3. The brain tries to hardwire everything it can. Now, what is this hardwiring? When we learn something new for the first time, imagine, remember when you learned to drive a car the first time? How easy was it? Or was it rather difficult? You had to remember to which pedal was the accelerator, which pedal was the brake, and if you, unfortunately, you had to learn a stick, that was a big task on its own. You had to remember looking at the mirrors, looking at the road, remembering the direction, and whoever was the teacher, you had to listen to them as well at the same time. And you probably thought, how in the world do people drive cars? This is just too hard. That was your brain making first connections. And it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy to make new connections. But today, when you drive a car, how easy or difficult is it? Is it easier? In fact, you do not consciously drive your car anymore. It's all non-conscious behavior. Your feet move without any conscious thought. Your hand moves on the gear without any conscious thought. Even the directions, you don't consciously think, where am I supposed to move, left or right? It's all non-consciously driven. And all non-conscious behavior and activity and even thinking is what we say hardwired circuitry. It is no longer in your conscious brain, it is parked in your non-conscious brain. So the brain tries to hardwire everything it can. Tries to automate your thinking, tries to automate your behaviors because it is less energy intensive. When you think consciously, your brain uses a lot of energy. In fact, how much energy? Imagine that in your house you have an appliance. And because you're using that appliance regularly, every month your electricity bill, 25% of your bill is coming because of that one appliance. So you're smart, you look pretty smart. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to try to use it as less as possible. Well, that is your conscious brain. On average, your conscious brain uses 25% of your daily caloric intake. Whatever you're eating today, 25% or more when you're actually thinking. So if you're actually processing what I'm saying and you're trying to understand more than usual, then you're burning even more calories. So conscious thinking is energy intensive. Non-conscious thinking uses hardly any energy. That's why the brain tries to automate everything by hardwiring it. Your behavior, your thoughts, your patterns. Number 4. Okay, it's coming? Yeah. Hardwiring is easier than conscious thinking. Let's do a little experiment so you can see what we mean. Conscious versus non-conscious thinking in action. I'm going to give you some math, very simple math, and I want you to shout out the answer. And I want you to notice when your brain switches from non-conscious to conscious and what you feel when it tries to make that switch. Okay, got it? So ready? Here's the math. 1 plus 1. 2 plus 2. 4 plus 4. 8 plus 8. 16 plus 16. 75 plus 91. Okay. When did you have to think consciously? Got it? How did you feel when you had to think consciously? Happy? No. You're like, what? Rahila, we still haven't had lunch yet. What is this? You're making us think? That's not fair. That's how the brain works. The brain does not like to think consciously because it takes a lot of energy to think. And we're talking about being a leader and trying to transform people's thinking. I'm telling you right now, it is a very difficult task because people do not like to think. That's how the brain works. But as a leader, you need to be able to get them to think. Insight number 5. It's practically impossible to deconstruct wiring. And what that means is the wiring, the hard wiring that you already have in your brains, known as habits. How many of you are smokers? Any smokers here? How many of you have tried to quit smoking? How easy was that? How easy was that, right? Any other people with bad habits? How many of you have tried to quit that bad habit? How easy was it? It's not easy. It's because we now know that once your brain has learned something and has hardwired it, this is a myth that you can unlearn something. You cannot unlearn anything. How many of you rode a bicycle, a two-wheeler, bachpan mein? Right? I did too. Now, if I were to put a bicycle in front of you and ask for volunteers who haven't ridden a bicycle for 10, 15, 20 years to come up and ride that bicycle, how many of you think you will be able to do it? Because once you learn something, it cannot be erased from your brain, which we now know. So you're thinking, oh my God, then it's useless. What are we supposed to do? Jo hai so hai, now we're stuck with it. Well, the last insight, number 6. You cannot destroy hardwiring, but it is easy to create new wiring. So 6 insights. We can create new wiring. We don't even want to think about the old wiring. We don't want to touch it. We want to leave it alone, and we want to focus instead on creating new circuitry, new wiring. Now, these 6 insights together are going to give you the secret to transforming people's thinking. So let's recap them, all right? So number 1, the brain is a. Number 2, no 2 brains. Number 3, it hardwires everything. Number 4, hardwiring is easier. No, is it? Is it? Hardwiring is easier in terms of thinking, right? Conscious versus non-conscious. 5, we can't deconstruct hardwiring. And 6, but we can create new wiring. If you understand these 6 insights about your brain, about your neighbor's brain, about your employees' brains, about your spouse's brain, about your children's brain, any human being who has a brain, okay, these 6 insights apply to everybody. So what can we do? Taking these 6 insights, what can we do to change thinking? How do these insights guide us? Well, let me turn here. What did you have for dinner last night? No dinner. Oh, no. That's too bad. What just happened here? We were talking about thinking. You just saw a gorilla, and you're thinking about the gorilla. And all of a sudden, I throw a curveball at you. What does your brain do? What did your brain do? It started to think for the answer. But look at what just happened. I asked this young gentleman a question. What did you do? Started thinking about what he ate for dinner last night. What must have he eaten? Is that what you were thinking about? What did you do? What did I eat for dinner last night? But I didn't ask you that question. Why does your brain stop doing everything it was doing and started to look for the answer to that question? Are you getting what I'm saying? If we want to change people's thinking, what do we need to do as leaders? We need to ask them questions. Because to the brain, a question is like candy. It can't resist a question. When any person's brain, you put a question in front of them, they will stop doing everything and they will start working on finding the answer to that question. And if you can ask the right questions to guide their brain in a thinking pattern, to start thinking, now think about this, now how about this, now how about this? Through every question, guess what you're doing? You are transforming their thinking. So Rockefeller, has anyone heard of Rockefeller? He was like a tycoon businessman. He has a very famous set of habits called the Rockefeller habits. And one of the key habits that Rockefeller says that he used with people was the 5 questions to the 1-tell ratio. He said, before I tell anybody anything, do this, do that, this is the answer, that's wrong. Before I tell anything, I pay the tax of leadership. And the tax of leadership is I ask 5 questions. Now, the questions have to be the right questions. If you focus questions on the problem, ये किसने किया? ये किसका कसूर है? ये क्यों नहीं हुआ? ये targets क्यों नहीं meet हो रहे हैं? If you ask questions on the problem, guess what you're focusing their thinking on? The problem. Instead, you have to ask questions on the solution. ये कैसे हो सकता है? कौन हमारी मदद कर सकता है? इसके बाद अब हमें क्या करना है? इसका alternative रास्ता क्या है? Those are the questions you need to ask. So if leadership is transforming thinking, guess where it has to start from? It has to start from yourself. Asking yourself those questions, challenging your own hardwired thinking patterns, because we all know that learning, forming new connections is from the cradle to the grave. We should never stop asking questions, because being human is being able to think. And when we tell people to stop thinking, whether it's the president of a country, don't think. You don't need education. Whether it's a manager of a team, don't think. Just do as I say. Whether it's the parent in a house, don't think. ऐसे ही होगा. Then we are killing humanity. Because leadership is transforming thinking one question at a time. Thank you very much.